An idea that was supported by HUD at the federal level, and it was to jumpstart communities in an effort to get people focused on the need to develop systems that were more responsive to homeless youth. Things that we learn from the 100-day challenge is that we have to think about what's uniquely Columbus and design an approach that accomplishes our overall goal, which is to house homeless youth. But within the character, if you will, and the way we've evolved as a human or as a human services community here in Columbus.
So I think a lot of the learning experience centered around just how difficult it can be to navigate our system as a young person. So coming to the table and meeting, and we have shelter providers, and we have Star House and Huckleberry House, and all these awesome people who work with youth, and we ourselves got confused when trying to map out the system for a young person who needs help. This could be someone that is literally without a place to stay, or someone who is more at risk in unsafe housing, and just how there's not a clear first step for assistance, and a lot of the assistances are kind of sporadic and located all over the place, and through no fault of anyone. Everyone has good intentions and everyone is doing great work, but there's a lot of silos that we talked about, and how can we break down these walls and actually team up. And so I think that is the direction we're heading, and that was kind of what we learned. And how do we make this for someone who is just aging out of foster care, or was just thrown out of the house, or is fleeing a violent situation? How can we make this easier for them, and an access point for them? That was a big takeaway for me.
What I learned was that the Rapid Rehousing Program is designed to serve 18 and over, to help them identify housing and secure housing. And what I found was that having this one size fits all doesn't really work for this population. And although we had the best of intentions by having the program designed that we prioritized people who fit from the 18 to 24 age group, the TAYs, we weren't really set up to work with them optimally. So it really pointed out to me a weakness in the program that we didn't recognize at first, because we thought prioritizing them was really satisfying that need.
I learned from the challenge that transition age youth need a voice. They need someone who's willing to stand up, someone who's willing to speak up, and someone who is willing to show up, so that one, their voices can be heard, but two, so that the services they receive are effective and efficient as they seek to resolve their homeless crisis.
I'd like to share with you that prior to working here as a social worker, I didn't know pregnant parenting teens struggled with homelessness, and I think a lot of people in our community would not believe that. But I can tell you that anywhere from 50 to 70% of our referrals coming in the door have addressed some type of homeless or housing issue. And so I think that the biggest thing I'd like to share with anybody who might be watching is that pregnant and parenting teens are feeling this crisis just like other youth. And when you have a family to worry about, that just adds a whole nother layer of reasons why housing instability causes, a ripple effect, if you will.
Many of the youth we serve at Star House have reported being abused, neglected, or exploited by the adults in their lives. And because of this, too often they don't trust adults or systems, including those that are in place to help. As for one example, many will sooner sleep outside in the freezing cold than go into an adult shelter because they fear being victimized by older adults. Research tells us that youth experiencing homelessness need low barrier programs that first gain their trust before connecting them to youth-centric stabilizing resources on a strategic timeline.
I learned that you can make a really big impact in a short amount of time. If you have the right people at the table and you have the commitment that you need, it is possible to make pretty big change in a short amount of time. I work in a public agency, and we had people from public and private agencies around town, and oftentimes it feels like we work and live in this really big world, and it's really complex, and it's hard and to see things, to see new initiatives take off. It's sometimes hard to really make change. And so the 100-Day Challenge really taught us that you can be the change, you can make that change if you really get the right people at the table and the right commitment. And with a charge as important as ending youth homelessness, I think that we all took that really seriously.
Getting youth more involved is it's certainly a challenge, because youth, young adults, older children in some cases, who are independent and trying to, get on with their lives, and they've got a lot going on in it. Not the least of which is, the struggle sometimes on a daily basis to figure out where you're going to sleep tonight and how you're going to meet your basic needs. So recognizing that and trying to engage youth who first and foremost need to address their own needs, and then ask them if they could find the time and energy to, put into this broader community work.
So that was one thing I learned, was the importance of listening to the voice of frontline staff. The other thing I learned was how hard it is to make changes in systems that are already in place. One of the things that we did during this time was start to ask questions of the system itself to see how do we do things differently, can we do them, and a lot of times we heard the answer was no, we can't do that, and then how do we push against that? And so I think it was hard. We saw things that were really difficult and challenging, but we kept doing the things that we knew that we could do and pushing against those things that were a challenge. And then the third thing that I learned is that this needed to be a movement that continued beyond 100 days. So even from the beginning, we said we went 300 days to really work through this. So that I think now one of the big successes for us has been that we are continuing the work, taking the lessons learned from the 100-Day Challenge and applying to some real system change that we're working on now.
We took the information that we learned and that we all know by working in this population every single day, and really shift our thinking about what it means to work with a young person, and that and we make it a lot harder than it has to be. I mean, remember that we all were a young person, and understanding that they just want to be heard, they just want to have a voice, and so being the champions in that.
Well, what I'd like to see is that we develop some more resources around that. I'd like to be able to provide additional supports to the RTAY clients while they're in the program, and then also as they exit it. We're intended to be very temporary. We work with people somewhere between 3 and 6 months after they're in housing, and I think that a lot of the TAY that we're working with, we find that they need longer time than that. So I'd like to build more supports around it, develop some more resources within the community, and also a piece that we have been working on and haven't really gotten to work really well yet is being able to bring people into our program who fit in that category, and not require them to come into shelter. that shelter isn't optimal for anyone, but it's an especially difficult situation for someone who's in that age group to come into an adult shelter and deal with all of the dynamics involved with that. So want to keep working on a way that we can bring people into our program and provide services to them and not have them have to enter the shelter in order to access it.
I think what we have to remember about homelessness is that it is not the whole story of someone's book, so to speak, but it is one chapter, and it is all of our responsibilities to help and not hurt. And so here at the YMCA Van Buren Center, we try to create environments where everyone can flourish as folks are rapidly resolving their homeless crisis.
I'd like to see youth-specific services for housing homeless youth, meaning that the people that are intervening are coming from a youth-specific evidence-based practice, and getting some support services around once they get housed, because developmentally we know that they're transitioning in life, and it's not just about getting them into the apartment, it's also about helping them maintain that housing.
Move forward in terms of ending homelessness for everyone. I think that this challenge taught us that transitional age youth are a different population and that they are adults, but they have different needs. And like I said, many of them are coming from childhood trauma, raised in homes where they've experienced a lot of different barriers. And so when you're young, I can remember when I was young and how hard that was, but to be young and not to have a pretty big support system, I think it just makes it all the more important for this population. So I would just like to see the community continue to move forward with this plan to end youth homelessness, recognizing that youth deserve to be at the table, youth should have a voice, and and just continue moving forward. Don't let barriers get in the way, and just remember that we can make the change if we really want to see it.
Building on good work of organizations like the Columbus Care Coalition, if we get trauma education, prevention, and intervention right in childhood and adolescence, then we can help improve people's ability to thrive in the future.
Now that we have to kind of fully vision and develop a model for a system and then resource it.
Things that I would hope that we build on, that we began to build, was how to get the voice of youth, both youth who are experiencing homelessness, youth that are at risk of homelessness, to get their voice heard so that we can build on those voices as well.